It's always dark, except for the light you have on your helmet. And it's just quiet.
You're exploring because you don't know what's there. And anything could be there.
The first time you ever go into a passage that no one's ever been down before, it is the most exhilarating feeling.
At this point, we've only discovered like 3% of all that might be there. It just ignites the imagination.
You'll go into a passage and you'll see it keeps going for a little bit. And the team will be like, does it go? And you're like, yeah, it keeps going. Then the next question in your mind is, where does it go?
This is Jewel Cave, one of the longest caves in the world. And these volunteer cavers are on a 4-day trip to survey and map new parts of this expansive underground wilderness.
Caves are one of those last frontiers. They're one of the few places on Earth where you can go and not know what you're going to see around the next corner.
Sometimes we'll actually walk right by something and somebody will say, wait a minute, does that go somewhere?
Hey, that looks like a weed. Let's take a look.
I went around a corner, climbed up, and I stood up in this giant room. It was 160 feet long, and it had a 100-foot tall ceiling. And I stood there, and I thought, this is pretty cool.
It goes! Come check it out!
I'm the first person in history to stand in this room right here.
Year after year, new discoveries are made by these explorers. Big rooms, winding passageways, and even underground lakes are added to the map of Jewel Cave. This is the next frontier of exploration.
I've had some incredible opportunities to find things like gigantic rooms, beautiful formations. You really have that opportunity to explore something that no one's ever seen.
You're walking where no one's walked before. For the most part, a lot of people aren't going to come into that passageway unless it's a main artery out to the exploration. So you may be the first to see it, you may be the last to see it. You're going to leave it the way it was, and that crystal you lit up for the first time is never going to sparkle again because no one's going to come by. And so for that moment, that crystal sparkled and you walk away. In the cave, it's dark, it's quiet, and it'll remain that way forever.
Explorers at Jewel Cave are constantly working at the edge of what has been mapped. But this presents a challenge that pushes the limits of basic human endurance.
The leads at the end of Jewel Cave are now getting so far out there that you have to set up a camp. The camp is actually very comfortable, and it's probably the darkest and quietest place you'll ever sleep. It's great to be able to come back to camp and have a hot meal. It really adds to our productivity and also safety because we're not so fatigued.
Campsites are located near water, but water is scarce in Jewel Cave. In some parts of the cave, small drips are collected for weeks. In others, it can be pumped from nearby underground lakes. Fresh water is essential for the cavers to forge ahead and expand the map.
In the future, I think it's really going to push the limits of human endurance and what we're capable of, and it's really exciting to be a part of that.
In this unforgiving environment, cavers must be careful and well prepared. All food is carried in with them. All forms of waste are carried out.
The trick with caving is you can't bring everything. Your pack is only so big, and you want to make it as light as possible because you're the one hauling it. You can't get tired in the middle of the trip and say, can you carry this? I've carried too much stuff. That doesn't happen.
An experienced caver can take a 4-day trip into Jewel Cave with a 15-pound pack containing food, survey equipment, and safety gear. But you don't have to commit to years of training or a multi-day trip to explore Jewel Cave. With a park ranger, you can ride the elevator 234 feet down to the target room and start to experience this otherworldly environment.
Floor manganese is the black strip that you are seeing underneath the level right there.
Thousands of visitors come each year to Jewel Cave. They find themselves drawn to the beauty and the mystery of this underground wilderness. On the scenic tour, visitors can get an up-close look at many forms of dripstone, such as flowstone, draperies, stalactites and stalagmites, and even soda straws. The plentiful calcite spar. These are the jewels that give this cave its name. Each guide offers visitors an educational experience, highlighting the cave in multiple ways, making the scenic tour a popular and memorable experience.
Go into a lighter, which is adequate enough light to see the features of the cave and into the passageway.
For those that want to experience even more of Jewel Cave, there are other options. The Historic Lantern Tour. This more strenuous tour twists and turns through the narrow passages where Jewel Cave was first discovered and explored. And for the truly adventurous, there's the Wild Caving Tour. 4 hours of real excitement. These passages are challenging and not always easy to get through. But once you do, even novice cavers discover things that are quite remarkable.
If you come a little bit closer, you can take a look. You can see that balloon right down here. And that hydromagnesite balloon is 1/1000th of an inch thick.
This is the only cave in the world where hydromagnesite balloons can be seen by the public. One of the many extraordinary yet incredibly fragile features of this cave. So, how did the cave itself form? There are still many unanswered questions, but here's what the latest research shows. Beginning 60 million years ago, around the same time the dinosaurs are dying out, geologic forces fractured the Pahasafa limestone of the Black Hills. Millions of years later, rainwater dissolves carbon dioxide from the soil and carries it into nearby streams, turning them slightly acidic. Over time, these streams cut into the rock. As some of the water moves through the fractures, it dissolves the limestone and opens up underground passages and rooms. When the water stops flowing, it leaves behind dissolved limestone, creating a coating of calcite spar. Without the buoyancy of the water, many passages partially collapse into piles of breakdown. In a few areas of the cave, rainwater seeps into air-filled passages, depositing unique calcite formations to adorn the cave. These beautiful and often colorful formations complement the complexity of the cave. This underground world formed over millions of years. Yet it was discovered just over a century ago. The year is 1900. And Frank and Albert Michaud are riding up Hell Canyon on a mineral prospecting trip. Hearing a strange whistling sound, they come across a small hole on the side of a limestone cliff, with cold air rushing out. They return the next day with dynamite to enlarge the hole. Climbing inside, they are the first people to ever see the beautiful crystal-covered passages. They name it Jewel Cave. The Michauds protect, develop, and promote the cave as a tourist attraction. In 1908, President Theodore Roosevelt proclaims Jewel Cave a national monument, the first ever monument created for the protection of a cave. For decades, less than 2 miles of passages are known. It isn't until the late 1950s that anyone realizes there might be more. Much more. In 1959, Herb and Jan Kahn, famed climbers of the Black Hills, team up with geologist Dwight Deal to start exploring the cave.
We would always climb with any passing climber that came along. And along came this fellow that had just graduated from college, Dwight Deal. So we went climbing with him, and when it got cold, he says, well, when it gets cold like that, you go underground. We went and came in with him, and we enjoyed it. It was fun. It's a lot like climbing. It's moving your body, conforming to the cave passages. But they don't let you just go in and have fun. You've got to contribute something to the cave or to science.
In 1965, Herb publishes a scientific paper on the cave's barometric airflow, proving there could be thousands of miles of yet undiscovered passages. Over the next 2 decades, on more than 700 caving trips, the Kahns discover and map more than 60 miles of new passages.
They've never found the end of Jewel Cave. That's still true.
In the 1960s, Herb Kahn determined that it was Jewel Cave's ever-present airflow that could be the key to determining its size.
He recognized that the air blowing in and out of the cave was in response to pressure changes. That makes it a barometric wind. In order to have that kind of response, it's going to be proportional to the pressure change outside and also proportional to the total volume of cave, even the part that hasn't been found yet.
More recently, cave climatologist Dr. Andreas Flitsch has been conducting a new airflow study.
Herb and Jan Kahn started the research in the 60s and they did a really great job. It is still the base of the work in barometric caves, but we have now more sensitive instrumentation.
With access to the latest scientific tools, Dr. Flitsch was able to update and refine the work started by Herb and Jan Kahn.
One thing is a thermal camera. You can see the surface temperature of the cave and you can see even the airflow. We have the ultrasonic anemometer, and with this the instrument can calculate 3-dimensional airflow information.
Well, we started with Herb's studies. He calculated a volume of about 4 billion cubic feet. Based on Andreas's measurements, we can expand that to like 14 billion cubic feet. Those volume predictions have allowed us to think big. With an average size of 1 million cubic feet per mile, there can be literally thousands of miles we haven't yet found.
Jewel Cave is such a stable cave, and it's one of the most stable caves for the airflow I've ever seen. And for me, there is no restriction why we couldn't have the biggest cave in the world.
Armed with this knowledge and a desire to map the unknown, dozens of volunteer cavers have made exploration a labor of love for more than 50 years.
Herb Kahn was the pioneer for the Jewel Cave mapping.
Dude, 55.
He was the one who really decided to break the cave out into multiple levels and give the levels color so you can visualize it on a 2D surface. We kind of take that a little bit further these days. Everything's digital. Of course, the actual mapping inside of the cave is done by hand with paper and pencil, but that gets transferred onto a computer once we're back in the office. And basically, we use computer visualization now to see all of those levels in the cave and build the map as the exploration is happening. The cave map at Jewel Cave, as far as I know, is one of the most up-to-date maps of any large cave in the world. And the exploration is ongoing. After every trip, we add the new piece that's been found, and we update the map, and we send it back out to the explorers, and that helps them plan for the future for the next trips that go into the cave.
It is taking longer and longer for explorers to reach the unmapped wilderness of Jewel Cave. And along the way, cavers often make unexpected discoveries.
We want to find big rooms, we want to find new formations, but it's also about the journey, and getting to the destination sometimes is almost as fun as being there, finding some of that new stuff.
Cavers pass through enormous rooms and passageways. Places like Cloud 9, Rambling Loft, the Western Motif, and countless unnamed passages and rooms. On a smaller scale, there are many mineral formations, known as speleothems, to carefully observe and study. Gypsum formations in every shape and size adorn this cave, such as flowers, needles, and beards.
It's a real thrill, to come across some of the rare speleothems deep within the cave. So pristine and so incredibly fragile.
I think everyone agrees the frontier of it all, the experience of going out to the end, is a value in and of itself.
As explorers continue to push the limits underground, a diverse bat population has found a home in and around Jewel Cave. A team from the University of Wyoming is tracking the bats to see how they're doing.
I'm trying to figure out how bats are using the cave, which species are using the cave, and when they're using it. When we catch bats, we take a bunch of different measurements to determine what kind of health they're in. We measure their forearms, we measure their weight, we look for parasites, we check their wings for physical damage. A lot of times they have little pinholes, sometimes you see scarring from previous injuries. For a couple of species that we're targeting in particular, we're affixing VHF transmitters on them. These transmitters send a pulse every second and a half or so. We're able to use VHF receivers to pick up that signal, and we can track the bat to wherever it is. After 5 to 10 days, the transmitter will fall off the bat. Hibernacula is a site where bats hibernate during the winter, and Jewel Cave is one of the largest in the western United States. A large hibernacula is about 20 to 30 bats. Jewel Cave, on the other hand, hosts at least 1,500 bats each and every year, and so it's really important that we maintain Jewel Cave as a working hibernacula for bat conservation.
Understanding and protecting Jewel Cave's bat population is one of the many important missions underway at this national monument. Jewel Cave piques our sense of wonder. There's so much more to discover, and the spirit of exploration just goes on and on.
One of the most memorable moments of my whole life, not just my life caving, was being the first person to see the water table, Hourglass Lake, the first lake discovered in Jewel Cave. And Jewel Cave is 99% dry, and here are thousands of gallons of water. And I got to be the first person to see that. It all pays off for that one time you come out and the room starts getting bigger. And it's a giant passage that your light doesn't get to the end of. You're so excited you don't get tired.
We had fun, and that's why we did it. I just hope the exploration can continue as far as it's humanly possible to do it.
It doesn't have to just be a cave. It could be your own backyard. Go out and find that adventure. Go discover something.
Everyone who comes to Jewel Cave can be inspired by the discoveries taking place. From day visits to long cave camps, the discoveries keep coming. And the more we find, the more questions we have. That's what keeps cavers and visitors coming back. Because down the next passage, around the next bend, the path goes on and on, out into darkness, in the wilderness, underground.
It's a long, long crawl away, and who knows what's beyond. I can picture slender soda straws a-dripping in a pond. Oh, it's a long, long crawl away, and who knows where it leads. What matter if my knee is pulp? What matter if it bleeds? Oh, it's a long, long crawl away that almost has a breeze. If it opens up a little, I can get back on my knees. It's a long, long crawl away, and who knows where it goes. Now my heels are on the ceiling, and the floor curls up my toes. Oh, it's a long, long crawl away, who knows where it will end. Now I've struggled to the corner, I can